Okay, thank you very much. We're going to get started here. Just to go over a few webinar logistics. If you are interested in asking a question, feel free to put it in the chat and raise your hand. We are going to address questions at the end of the webinar, but please, again, feel free to utilize the chat and to raise your hand. We will be able to keep track of you and get to your questions at the end of the webinar. So our agenda today will have Nadine Miller. She is the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer for the New Hampshire Division of Historical Resources. She will be giving us some background information on historic resources in New Hampshire. And then we have Brandy Laughlin. She is a Preservation and Planning and Development Coordinator with the New Hampshire Division of Historical Resources. And she's going to go through tools for municipalities to review and the purpose and the intent of historic districts and heritage commissions. At the end of Brandy's presentation, we will have a question and answer session. If we do go over, our speakers have graciously agreed to accept questions after the webinar has ended. So if we don't get to your question because of time constraints, please feel free to reach out to the speakers or myself. We'll be glad to answer your questions for you. The contact information is at the end of the presentation. So having said that, an introduction, let me introduce Nadine Miller, and she can take control and start the presentation. So thank you very much, and the floor is yours, Nadine.
Thank you. Let me just make sure I can move the slide here. So we've definitely had the opportunity to work with different iterations of the Office of Planning and Development through the years, in person at some of their conferences, and certainly now with these virtual opportunities, we think they're great. And we would love to hear from you guys in general if there's some other topics that you'd like to have presented. We'd love to do this again, maybe in the springtime, see how that goes. But this was a topic that we thought would be of interest to folks in the planning field, and it's really an introduction to preservation planning in New Hampshire. And as we said, we're going to talk about an overview of preservation, what it is, what we hope to do, and then focusing in on heritage commissions and historic district commissions. So historic preservation is really a broad interdisciplinary field of professionals. It's not just architects or architectural historians, but it also includes archaeologists, ethnographers, planners, and there's certainly work in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. We really like to look at our past. How can we preserve for the future, not just necessarily for the sake of architecture, but really learning about ourselves and hoping that that can move forward with young folks into the future. And many people, as I mentioned, work in historic preservation. There's archaeologists and curators, other historians. The National Park Service carries out a lot of the work at the national level, and each state has a historic preservation office, which is what the Division of Historical Resources is. So the field at large, again, there's the federal government, and while the Park Service is really the overarching or a federal organization that primarily works in historic preservation, there are many other federal agencies that we work with at our office on a daily basis as a regulatory reviewer, and that includes HUD and the Army Corps of Engineers, Federal Highway Administration, USDA, but we work with over 75 different federal agencies who try to make sure that their resources are protected during federal actions and undertakings. And also, we can't forget our nonprofit friends, because we work very closely with the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance. They're sort of almost a sister agency to us. They're the nonprofit membership group, and we work with them quite a bit on other presentation opportunities and with some of their Old House and Barn Expo and their conference. Historic New England is another organization, and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And at the local level, most of our historical societies are nonprofits. Again, there's the trades and technology side of historic preservation, and we can always use more folks in this end. preservation contractors, masons, folks who do window repair. We really need to make sure that these positions are filled. There's so many projects out there that are on the slow motion train because we just don't have enough folks who are working in the trades these days. And that also leads us to consulting. There actually is a very broad field of consultants, architectural historians, archaeologists, planners, etc., who can be hired by municipalities to complete inventory forms, conditions assessments, National Register nominations, grant writing, etc. And so those folks are out there as well. And within state government, I do like to mention LCHIP. They're sort of a quasi-state government agency. They're not a state office, but they do get some funding from general funds and the Moose Plate grants, as well as our Bureau of Historic Sites, which is part of our Parks Department, and they run the multitude of historic sites that we have. And they have a brand new director, so we're welcoming him and getting to know him and looking forward to working with him soon. But the Division of Historical Resources I'd mentioned is a state historic preservation office. We're mandated by the National Park Service and the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. Our office actually started in 1974, and we currently have 11 staff, including archaeologists, architectural historians, and program assistants. And we're located on the south end of Concord on Pillsbury Street in a great little historic building that used to be a maternity ward of the Pillsbury Hospital. So we do quite a lot with our 11 folks. I mentioned a few things here because we do spend a lot of time helping communities identify and understand the state's resources and the resources at the local level. So we have quite a number of programs there. We work with communities, agencies, and organizations with their rural committees and cemetery groups. We provide technical assistance as well when asked. We also balance resource stewardship and growth with holding preservation easements, covenants, and other agreements. We have a staff person who's now taking on education and helping with some community work. We have our survey and inventory, and we also have some funding and revitalization opportunities through our conservation license plate or Moose Plate grants, through our certified local government program that gives a portion of our funding to certain communities, of which we have 25, but we're adding a few more soon. The Federal Preservation Tax Credit Program, which many of you are probably familiar with, which tends to be a lot of the mill rehabilitation projects and others like that in the state. And we also have some additional guidance out there. So our role is both a regulatory role under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, and that's where I'd mentioned where we work with 75 plus federal agency as well as the state to review up to 1,500 projects a year with a very small staff. There's like 3.5 of us who do this. So we're working on big projects like the Northern Pass a few years ago, cell towers, highway work, and we're working with those federal agencies and the communities as consulting parties to try and minimize impacts to historic properties in the wake of these projects. And if we can't avoid or minimize, we do try and find mitigation efforts to resolve the loss of those resources. But we do have some very popular programs that just seem to become more popular every day, and that's our state marker program. We're getting a lot of requests for state markers, and we're really excited about that. Our state register program sort of kind of goes with our national register, but it's a little bit easier. For that, actually, I see a question about what is the threshold for Section 106, so I'll answer that really quickly. And that is if there is federal funding, licensing, or permitting that is required by an applicant. And so oftentimes if there's just a local planning process or even just a state wetland permit, it's not required, but if there's any oversight by the Army Corps of Engineers for permitting or other such permitting or licensing, we get involved. So we do try and really make sure at our office that if we're in a regulatory role, we make sure we state that. If we're just providing technical assistance, we want to make sure folks understand that too. We also have a summer program called Scrap, and that's for archaeology, and folks can volunteer. And we just finished up at Bear Brook. We've been doing a lot of work the last few years at some of our state parks, and that's really exciting too. So I'm going to pass this over to Brandy, and she's going to talk a bit about preservation tools for communities in New Hampshire, primarily through heritage commissions and historic district commissions. And we have some great examples about 3/4 of the way through about what communities can do. And I'll kind of step in a little bit with that, but I'll let her take it away from here.
Thank you, Nadine. So I just want to start briefly with a quick introduction. Again, my name is Brandy Laughlin, and what I do for the Division of Historical Resources is I oversee the Certified Local Government Program, the Federal Historic Preservation Tax Credit Program, and our Preservation Planning Program. So I have my hands in a lot of these pies that we're going to discuss today, as does Nadine, based on her various hats. As you know, with a lot of small government offices, a lot of us have multiple roles. So, so if you have questions about any of these that do not get addressed today, please do feel free to reach out to us. As Stephanie said, our contact information will be listed on a slide at the end. And you can always look for us on the DHR website, or even just Google us and DHR and it'll come up too. So I'm going to start this is a brief overview of some of the topics that we're going to talk about today. I'm not going to get in depth on all of them because we only have a limited time, but these are the most used tools in New Hampshire, and they're the ones that we get the most inquiries about in the office as well. So I've got a quick list here: heritage commissions and historic district commissions, which will be kind of the main topics of discussion today, along with the demolition delay regulations. Neighborhood heritage districts are another very underutilized tool in New Hampshire that I'll touch on very briefly. Master planning, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with if you have participated in your community's master planning process. General community outreach, local partnership opportunities, our certified local government program, the Federal Historic Preservation Tax Incentives Program, and then New Hampshire RSA's 79D and 79E, which are state enabling legislation that communities can adopt to aid in preservation in their communities. And I'll get into a little bit more detail about those, but I'm not going to cover them too much because we don't have a huge role in them. I just want folks to be aware of their existence. So heritage commissions are authorized in RSA 674-44. They generally have a town-wide scope and range of activities that's determined by the municipality. They serve as an advocate for historic resources within their community, and they're often compared to conservation commissions for historical resources. We'll get into the difference between a heritage commission and a historic district commission in a couple of slides, but in general, a heritage commission really takes a holistic look at a community, and a historic district commission generally looks at exactly that, a designated historic district within a community, a defined geographical boundary. So heritage commissions, again, generally advise and assist other local boards and commissions on matters related to historic preservation. One of the biggest tools and goals generally of a heritage commission is this survey and inventory of community historic resources. This is sometimes a difficult task to for folks to undertake, especially if there isn't a lot of funding at the local level. But it is something that we highly encourage communities to try to at least lay the foundation for, because you really can't know what it is you need to protect if you don't know what it is you have. And survey and inventory gives you a baseline and a foundation to gauge what's important in your history, in your local history, when you get a look at everything that you have. Heritage commissions also assist planning boards in writing or updating a historic resources chapter in a master plan, or even in helping a planning board ensure that historic resources are taken into account within other chapters of a master plan, if there isn't a specific historic resources chapter in that plan. Proposing and implementing preservation planning strategies, again, another holistic take in your community, and general community outreach. This is a very important disclaimer with an asterisk, of course. So heritage commissions do not regulate what individual property owners may do to their buildings. Regulating what happens to historic buildings is the realm of historic district commissions, not heritage commissions. You can see I have an asterisk there, and it's very tiny, but I've got a whole slide right there with my full disclaimer. So a heritage commission may assume the duties of a historic district commission and function as a regulatory body if the community so wishes. Sometimes a heritage commission is already in existence, and when a community wishes to adopt a local historic district, they just put those duties under the already existing heritage commission rather than establish a second board. Sometimes a historic district commission is in existence as well as a heritage commission. And as we all know, it can be difficult sometimes to get volunteers in our communities to serve on boards. So it is not out of the realm of possibility for a historic district commission board to be dissolved and then to slide that regulatory role over to the heritage commission. And this is a way that some towns do consolidate the powers and responsibilities of those two boards due to sometimes lack of volunteer resources, among other reasons. So some towns that do have combined heritage commissions and historic district commissions include Wakefield, Durham, and Goffstown, among several others. Those are just a couple that I picked out to fit on the slide. So you can see here, this is just a clip of the Durham website, and it shows how it covers both. But they just, again, to be very clear, in general, a heritage commission and a historic district commission do have distinct roles unless they are specifically combined by a community. So historic district commissions, that's the authorization legislation there, are meant to have review over a specific geographically defined area within a community. And generally, this is an area that has been determined as having significant historic character within the community. And so the town has decided that they want to be able to regulate what happens within that area. It is one of the most effective and comprehensive tools for managing change in a historic area. And I want to be very clear that we use the term managing change rather than preventing change, because historic districts are not time capsules, and historic district commissions are not meant to keep a historic district within a certain, frozen in time. We are human beings, things change, technology changes, materials change, the way that we live changes. And it is important that we allow these historic buildings to grow with us as humans, so that they can continue to be contributing and functioning buildings. Functioning building is the best preserved building because it's being used. So, but managing that change in a way that is sensitive to the historic nature and character of the district is really the role of the Historic District Commission. It's also meant to ensure that new construction and significant alterations are respectful of existing character. Again, not preventing new construction or changes, but really just ensuring that the changes are done in a thoughtful way that's respectful of the historic nature of the district. This is just a quick rundown. This is directly from the RSA. So when the state decided that they were going to enable a historic district in the state, they had these goals and the purposes. So preserving the town's cultural, social, economic, political, community, and architectural history, conserving property values in such districts. There are studies that show that regulated historic districts, because of the predictability of the condition of the buildings and the predictability of development in that area, property values can sometimes be a little bit steadier than in other unregulated areas. Fostering civic beauty, strengthening the local economy, and promoting the use of historic districts for the education, pleasure, and welfare of the citizens. So in New Hampshire, most districts function like a zoning overlay. There are some towns that have districts that were established very early on, when the concept of historic districts in regulation were new. And some of those towns, they do have them functioning as their own zone, but 99% of the communities in New Hampshire, their districts function like an overlay. And that overlay is overseen by the Historic District Commission. The regulations and design guidelines are created by and tailored to the community. There is no prescriptive regulation or design guideline. We do have some communities that we are happy to point you to that have updated design guidelines. If anybody has questions or would like to see a sample or example communities, we're happy to do that. Send those to you. This next bullet. So currently there are approximately, there are about 50 communities in New Hampshire with local historic district ordinances. And within those communities, some have multiple historic districts. So we're guessing somewhere around 80 total local historic districts within the state, again, within about 50 communities. I will say though, that our role at the DHR is advisory and we are not regulatory. So we are, I would say, experts in the field of preservation, but we are not in charge of historic districts within the state. Those are all determined at the local level. We're happy to advise and give information, but we have no bearing or review over any of that. These numbers do come from the Office of Planning and Development's survey. Well, not the number 80, the number 50 did come from the OPD survey, which is a voluntary survey that communities take every year. And it does give us some really good information. So just a little plug, if you receive a request for survey, if you know that your town has and they haven't answered, whenever that might come out, encourage folks to make sure that gets filled out for them. And then as expressed in state law, the preservation of structures and places of historical, architectural, and community value is a public purpose. It's for the public good. So the next few slides, I'm going to go over tools for heritage commissions, and I'm saying and historic district commissions because some apply to both. So a heritage fund is authorized per the RSA as well for heritage commissions if the community wishes to fund one. And these are really great resources if you're able to get your community to set one up for your heritage commission. The money can be used to acquire property, which is not done so much because most folks, frankly, don't get that kind of funding in their heritage fund. But inventory and survey efforts can certainly be funded on a more realistic level by these heritage funds. And again, those are fabulous tools. If your community does not have an inventory and survey, program or plans for one, we'd be happy to talk to you about how that works and maybe how you might best go about finding what will work for your community. So in order to establish one, you need to have it voted on at the next town meeting, if you're a town. Prepare for an eventual line item or warrant article in the town budget. And remember that it's okay to start small and build from there. Smaller projects can be really great foundations for future endeavors, and proving to your community that you can make, good use out of small amounts of money. And with preservation, we are used to working with very tight budgets. So there are a lot of really cool projects that you can do with a very small budget, and you can really show your community, how much more you could do with even a slightly larger budget too. Nadine and I are going to go over some of these project ideas for you too. So building a presence in the community is really important for heritage commissions and historic district commissions. We all know, some of us who've been in preservation for a while anyway are very familiar or have probably been referred to as the Historical Commission, which we don't love. Thank you. But it is important that we establish a presence in the community, that we reach out to folks, we help them understand really what our goals are, and that is to preserve our community character for everybody. So creating a page on your town's website, leveraging social media presence, those are all, basic, great steps. Transparency is very important. Consistency is very important. Introducing yourselves to other town officials and boards and commission members, as well as town staff. Sometimes, there isn't a lot of interaction between various boards and commissions and staff or each other. So being willing and prepared to offer assistance or information about your mission and goals is also very important. I always encourage folks to kind of have their elevator speech ready. If they, that's a good exercise for boards to take on, maybe in a work session, what's everybody's elevator pitch? If somebody asks you, what exactly do you do on that thing? That's always a good thing to have in your back pocket. You never know when people are going to ask you random questions. So having that pitch is good. Working closely with those other boards and commissions is great. You never know when there might be some overlap in your goals, when you might be able to partner up for a project, or to, move forward some other kind of regulation or ordinance or whatever might benefit, both your missions. And reaching out to community groups such as the Historical Society, any Main Street organization, business groups. Those are all great partners as well, for both the Heritage Commission and Historic District Commission. So Nadine and I now are going to kind of go back and forth a little bit. Here we're going to talk about project ideas. We thought this would be a really great way to show those of you who, maybe don't have a Heritage Commission or Historic District Commission yet, or maybe have a young one, or anybody who might be interested in what kind of stuff that you guys, that you can do with these boards. So partnering with schools, youth programs, and senior programs can be a really great way to, again, share the mission of your board or your commission, as well as getting more visibility. Some projects that we've seen in other communities, not necessarily in New Hampshire, but one really cool project I saw during COVID was one community partnered with some artists in their community, and they did drawings of notable historic buildings within the town, and they created a really cool coloring book that they handed out in the school system. So the kids all had coloring books of the really recognizable historic buildings, and that was really neat. Nadine, there was another one that we discussed here, right?
There was, yeah. So I wanted to share a really great project that happened in Keene. And while it did generate from the Section 106 process I mentioned earlier, Keene has a very active Heritage Commission and Historic District Commission. And that is also a role of these commissions to participate in a Section 106 regulatory role if they choose to and provide input. So this was a project with their middle school when they were building a new middle school in town. And it happened that as part of the regulatory process, archaeological studies were conducted and a very, very significant Paleo-Indian archaeological site. And that's the oldest we have, 12,000 plus years old often. And it was identified in the new area with the school. So they had to do a lot of testing and learned a lot about that site. They also tried to avoid as much of it as possible. But now they have an area of the school where students can actually go out and take a look at the site, and they've incorporated that all into their curriculum, which I think is wonderful. And I know it's really hard these days for schools to incorporate some of this historical information in their curriculum because they're so bound by, regulatory state and federal actions. But we thought this was a really great partnership.
Another great way, everybody loves a plaque program in their community. These are generally recognition of, significant landmarks in town, or paired with the next preservation awards program. It's a really great way to instill pride of place in your community. Was there a specific community we highlighted here? No, okay.
Oh, we know that Manchester has the Preservation
sorry.
Awards program that the Historic Association runs. I'm sure that the Heritage Commission in town, who's becoming even more active, plays a role in that.
Writing articles for news media. Local media is always looking for press releases. They're happy to take them. So if you've got a project that you're undertaking, or of a local project that's happening and you maybe want to pair up with those folks, that's always a great step to take. Excuse me, designing and publicizing a walking tour for your community. This is always a smashing success. We have quite a few communities in the state who have who've undertaken this as a project. Sanborn is one of the most recent ones who did a walking tour of their historic district in the little kind of town center. They said they had a great turnout. People love learning about their community. A couple other communities that we know have done this include Keene and Amherst, which we're going to talk about a little bit more about how they're kind of bringing that into the 21st century. So designing exhibits and offering programs on local history. So Keene and Amherst have started projects recently where they're doing kind of crowdsourcing history. They're doing digital story maps of neighborhoods and historic districts. And I think we learned a lot during COVID about how important it can be to expand into additional media beyond your, maybe before there would be a brochure that you would pick up at town hall or, maybe the Chamber of Commerce for your walking tour. But really putting these in the digital realm have made them much more accessible for folks, as well as easier to find too. So watch for those. Those are, I think, coming out within the next, probably the next year. The managing and starting social media accounts, again, pretty straightforward. I know it can be hard for on a government level to have social media accounts. I know all the red tape we have to jump through for the Instagram account that we want that we wanted, but it can be very much worth it if it's something that you can manage. Creating a resource center for property owners in town. This can be a great, again, a great way for folks, especially if you have a historic district, for folks to learn about what it means to own a historic property and the ways that they can really take care of their building and do repairs or replacement or things like that. And we are happy to share other sources of information that you can point them to when you don't know the answers. Encouraging your town to adopt preservation-friendly legislation like 79E and 79D. Again, I'm just going to very briefly go over these. So there's enabling legislation for your town or community to adopt either or both of these. 79E is a property tax abatement, and it has various levels of time based on the purpose and work done to a building. And some criteria include, I believe, affordable housing or housing and a couple other criteria, but you can also lengthen the time of your abatement if you rehabilitate a historic building and if it meets the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. We can point you to resources, further resources about both of these. 79D is somewhat similar. It applies to barns, and it is also a property tax abatement. So the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance has some really good resources about both of these. They are not, they are locally adopted ordinances if your town chooses to adopt them. So our office does not generally have any role in them, but again, we are happy to point you to resources to find out about them. Applying for grants for the preservation of local buildings. So here is where we get back to LCHIP that Nadine had discussed at the beginning, as well as our Moose Plate grants. Those are generally available to municipalities and nonprofit entities. Or is Moose Plate just municipality, Nadine?
Yes, just municipalities.
Okay.
Mhm.
So Moose Plates are just municipalities, so that's a good one to think about. I mean, that's like the smallest pool that you can, you know, as far as competition. So keep that in mind. LCHIP is municipalities and not nonprofits, I believe. Again, that survey and inventory program, I'm gonna keep beating that drum. It's just a really, really good way to start and to know what you've got. Creating a historic resources chapter for your town's master plan, or incorporating items, you know, incorporating historic resources into other chapters if you don't have a separate historic resources master plan chapter. And as well as disaster planning. That's very important, you know, to consider. We're all thinking about climate change and the effects of that. Nadine had a quick little part she wanted to pop in here. We were talking earlier, and I think she did a really great explanation. So
I just wanted to mention here that I'm kind of touting the archaeology side of things because we often don't think of archaeology when we're on a Heritage Commission or HDC, but we are working a lot with FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission on dams. And one of the things that they're looking at is the effect of climate change on erosion when water levels rise or get lowered. And that certainly has a direct response to the potential for exposing archaeological sites that are on our waterfronts and then, you know, lessening the integrity of those sites or losing them altogether. So this is just something to keep in mind with archaeology as well. I mean, it certainly can impact historic resources, water level change, water rise. And I know Portsmouth has been doing a lot of disaster planning, especially around their Prescott Park area, Strawberry Bank as well. So there's a lot of great information online if you're interested in learning more about that.
thank you. Hosting workshops for owners of historic properties or even just generally members of the community. Things like how to research the history of your property, weatherization for historic buildings, how to identify architectural styles in the community. You'd be surprised how many experts you might have in your community that might be interesting to sit on a panel or give a talk. These are great ways, again, part of that outreach to the community, and being transparent and helpful and really helping folks understand the mission here. And partnering with other boards and commissions to create overlapping projects. Nadine also had a great example for this one.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of mention on both. One with the workshops, one we were really excited about, you guys might be familiar with, happened a few years ago in Keene. And I bring that up because Keene was really interested in developing a new local historic district commission or area in their town for a local district. And we're getting a lot of pushback because it was near Keene State University and other areas there. And we suggested that perhaps instead of pushing that forward, they take a step back and really explain to people in town why that area of town is significant and what it means to have the local district. So these workshops then were hosted within that area of town. They had a walking tour. They had a architectural history of that area of town. They had another workshop on how to fix and maintain your historic building. And that was so well received. The next year they decided to do more topics. So it's a good way to kind of step back sometimes if what your main mission might have some controversy. Let's take a step back and get people engaged as to why they even should care about protecting their resources. And the other one I'm excited to share too that you may or may not be familiar with is the aspect of partnering with other boards. And Hooksett has a long tradition of that. I spoke last fall at a trail opening along the Merrimack River that was proposed and worked on by the Conservation Commission, but their local Heritage Commission did some research in the area and acknowledged that there was brick making there, and many of these brick yards actually made bricks for all of Manchester. The building that I live in, which is a historic mill, actually has those bricks in it. So I thought it was really cool. So they developed a couple of interpretive signs along that trail that brings people to the trail as well and gives them some more information, because the brick yards themselves are gone, but the open space remains. And with these historic photos, it's really great to get a better understanding of those resources that were there in our history. So I wanted to share those. Thank you, Brandy.
Thank you. So I'm running a little tight on time here, and I want to make sure that we do leave time for questions. So I'm going to pop through the next few slides pretty quickly. They're on demolition delay ordinances. Before I jump into that, though, I do want to say that a lot of the projects that Nadine and I are talking about as examples are projects that we know about either through our certified local government program because we helped fund them through the grants, or perhaps we are familiar with them through our Section 106 program that Nadine is part of and oversees, or various other ways that our offices happen to touch the projects. That being said, we know that there are other amazing projects happening in the state, and maybe we just haven't heard about them. So if you're one of those communities and you're doing some great stuff, please let us know. Send us an email, give us a call. We'd love to hear about what you're doing. We'd love to hook you up with other communities who are interested in projects maybe similar to what you've done. Or if you would like to do some of these projects, we're happy to hook you up with those communities. So I just want to put that out there that we know folks everywhere are doing really cool stuff. So definitely feel free to reach out to us. Very quickly, again, these will be in the slides, so I won't go over it too quickly. Creating a Heritage Commission or a Historic District Commission. The process is the same as creating a Conservation Commission or other review boards in your town. This is kind of the general rundown. Demolition review was a very popular tool for localities to adopt not too long ago, and I think some are still in the process of adopting them. It's a tool that provides communities with the means to ensure that potentially significant buildings and structures are not demolished without notice and some level of review. I want to be very clear that demolition review doesn't prevent demolition, and it only provides a timeout for whatever time period is designated in your local ordinance. That's 30, 60, 90 days are kind of the numbers we see mostly. And it's really meant to provide a chance for the community to evaluate how significant that building might be to them, meet with the applicant, and explore alternatives to demolition. It's generally adopted as an amendment to a building code or implemented as a standalone ordinance, or sometimes as a bylaw in an existing preservation or zoning ordinance. How can they be adopted? Again, wait, did I Nope, okay, I didn't move forward, hang on. What can be reviewed? Generally, they review buildings built before a specific date, structures that are visible from a public way or of a certain size. There are usually these criteria in the ordinances to make sure that you're not, reviewing the 20 square foot shed on the back of a 10-acre property that nobody's ever gonna see. Benefits again, include just giving time for the community to maybe find some, alternatives. Other tools to explore, I don't have time, but please contact us if you have questions. Neighborhood Heritage Districts, our certified local government program, the Federal Historic Preservation Tax Incentives Program, which I'd be happy to give a whole talk about someday if people ask. The New Hampshire State Register, preservation advocacy groups, and friends groups. So here we are at the last slide. Stephanie, would you like me to start? How do we want to do questions here? Or you want to take over?
Great. Yeah, thank you very much. I guess we could get into the chat here and let's see. Give me a second, make sure that we're getting back far enough so we don't miss anyone. Nadine answered that one. Okay, there's a question from Susan Slack. Do HDCs have authority to do a survey of a town's historic resources?
I would answer this with yes. It's not necessarily explicitly outlined in the RSAs, but I would say that any board or commission, or I mean, technically any member of the public can do a survey. It just involves research, maybe taking photographs from a public way, that kind of thing. So absolutely, if you only have a historic district commission and you don't have a heritage commission, that's definitely still a project that you can undertake. And as a matter of fact, we highly encourage our communities, our certified local government communities who often only have a historic district commission, to still survey and inventory the rest of the town so that they have an idea of what they have.
And Brandy, we have some examples of locally sponsored historic surveys. It is kind of hard because it's helpful to have sort of a professional guiding the process, and that can cost some money. And it does take quite a bit of time of volunteer effort, but it certainly is worth their while to do that in the community.
Great, thank you. Just for clarification, is there a specific RSA to back up the demo delay ordinance?
I don't know. I feel like there should be, and I didn't cite it. But I can certainly find an answer to that question, and get back to you if somebody wants to send me an email with their contact information.
Okay, yeah, sure. So Elizabeth,
I was just going to say, I don't think there is. And I think this is what's been sort of a controversy with this demolition delay process in our state, and that the communities that have adopted it, such as Concord, have put it under their code enforcement. And it's a little loose. So I think that has been a concern from some folks when they get challenged by that there really isn't something specific in the law to cover that.
okay.
You're right. Yeah.
Elizabeth Moreau answered the question. So Elizabeth, if you'd like a little bit more information, again, please take advantage of reaching out to Brandy and or Nadine for more information on that question. So thank you very much. Another question, is there a list of communities with demo delay ordinances?
We do not maintain a list of those, but I wonder, is that a question, do you know, that you ask on your survey?
I don't think that we do.
Yeah.
It's new to me, so I don't think that we do answer
That'd be
that.
a great question to ask in your survey, because it really goes hand in hand with HDCs. If you're able to ask that question, it's a useful tool.
Yeah, as we're getting clarification from NOAA, OPD does not track those types of ordinances, but yes, something very
Preservation Alliance might
True.
have more information. They do some tracking independently, and
Okay.
I know that's something that they've been discussing a lot. So if anyone's interested, we can check in with the Alliance and get back to you.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing them in, because the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance, we do have their information, on our contact information slide. We have a link to their website, so they also like work hand in hand with the Division of Historical Resources. So if there's other preservation work or that you're interested in looking into, or grant programs for your communities, we encourage you to reach out to the Preservation Alliance for any other questions or information that you'd be looking for. So we're kind of winding down here. We have some extra time, but if there's anyone who has any other questions, again, feel free to jump in and put your question into the chat. We'll be glad to answer them for you. Here we go. Okay. What are the advantages for a town to become a certified local government program?
That's a great question. For starters, I just want to say that one of the main requirements to become a certified local government is to have a locally regulated historic district. This shows to the state and the National Park Service that your community is invested in preserving the historic character of your community where it may exist. That being said, certified local governments, really the biggest advantage is that they are eligible to apply for a grant program that we oversee in our office. A portion of the funds that we receive every year from the federal government is given out to certified local governments through our office, and that can help with projects like survey and inventory, national register listing, hosting workshops, putting together these walking tours. A lot of the projects that Nadine and I discussed can be supported by funds from the certified local government grant program. So that is obviously definitely one of the biggest advantages to being a certified local government. One thing I will say as well, we can give funds to our CLG communities to apply for membership to the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. And that's a nationwide group that has a lot of really great resources for folks that are on their historic district commissions, or maybe town staff, things like that. But even if you are not a certified local government community, the membership price for that organization is very, very low. It's $50 to $100 depending on the population of your community. So I'm just going to also throw that out there as another resource for folks to consider.
Great. We still have several minutes left. So if anyone is hesitant to ask a question, now is your time to put a question in the chat. We'll be glad to answer that for you. Just as a reminder, our contact information is the slide up, as well as we encourage people to check out our OSI training page, as well as utilizing the survey. It's an anonymous survey of what you think about our plan web topics and any other topics that you may have that you think that we should be addressing. We welcome your comments. So please check out our OSI planning training page. And just give a few more minutes here. Hopefully everyone's questions were, oh, here we go. Okay. Can you repeat the name of the organization you just mentioned, Brandy?
Sure. It's the National Alliance for Preservation Commissions. And if you just search NAPC, it also might come up.
Brandy, you just attended their conference, didn't you? And maybe you can explain some of the topics that they cover typically.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So I just got back from a conference in Cincinnati that they hosted. They host every other year. So on even numbered years, it's called Forum. And I attended some really awesome sessions. Sometimes, you're not quite sure what you're going to get out of things, but this whole conference was amazing. One of the ones that I attended was on some communities, larger cities right now, that are looking into dismantling or deconstruction ordinance instead of demolition. So to incentivize dismantling buildings rather than just bulldozing them if they do have to come down, which sounds a little bit like it's and you know, the antithesis to preservation, but sometimes, you know, the buildings just, we don't win them all. So, you know, if we're not going to win the building still standing, the least we can do is try to see if there's maybe a more environmentally friendly way that they can come down and continue to use those, you know, those materials that have inherent value in the community. So that was a really cool one. I went to a really great one on building codes and historic buildings. And for those of you who maybe own a historic home or historic building, or again, maybe on your HDC, you've had to review projects where, you know, they say we have to do this because we have to meet code. This was a really great session about, you know, the complications of meeting the intent and spirit of the code while maybe not doing exactly what's prescribed, and how to work with your building officials to do that in partnership. So that was a really, really great session. My coworker attended a session on working with realtors in your community and helping them understand what it means to be part of a historic district, and, you know, how to communicate that to potential buyers and resources for them. I could go on and on. It was great. I really actually had it was an amazing conference. They had some great keynote speakers. The sessions were so cool. People are doing awesome stuff all over the place.
Thanks.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So we are winding down. If there are no further questions, again, I encourage you to reach out to Nadine or Brandy if you think of something afterwards or want more information about a specific program that they discussed. And again, I would encourage you to please take our survey and let us know how we're doing and for any other future webinar topics. Also, the slides or the recording of this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel. That's on our website, the OSI YouTube channel. That'll be available early next week. Oh, wait, we have a few more questions coming in. Let's see. There's a lot of focus on historic buildings and districts. What boots on the ground resources are available to help with identification and preserving archaeological sites?
Well, we do have some
Question.
archaeologists on staff, and I would certainly, for the archaeology, refer to them, because with archaeology, there's both pre-contact or Native American archaeology, and there's post-contact or sort of our European or historic archaeology. So there's so many different ways to go about it. I mean, certainly with our pre-contact, it's so important to work with our Indigenous groups to better understand those resources. So we do have some staff that we can refer you to. One of the things we're also working more on in our office is identifying cultural landscapes, which is a little bit more than just the buildings or just the archaeology, but it's really taking in all of our resources from the natural environment. Oh yes, David Truby. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, we would love to come out and see as many sites as we possibly could. As I mentioned earlier on, there's 11 of us, and it's a very small office, and we have over 1,500 projects review and many, many things that we do. So as much as we can come out, we try, but we're not always able to. But there's a robust consulting group of folks out there who do this as well. And we'd be happy to follow up if you'd like to email me personally, and I can see what additional information I can help you with.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Nadine. And again, thank you very much, Nadine and Brandy, for a wonderful presentation. And we look forward to future presentation and cooperating with you. So thank you very much again. And thank you to all of our attendees.
Great.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.